Okay, you crab, apple, hickory jocks. How's it going? Friendly neighborhood Kamiko Z coming at you. I haven't done one of these in a couple weeks, and I apologize. I'm gonna try to get into it and um, make the next recording today. As you can see here, the 19 here is a little bit highlighted. We're on to bug management, and I'm going to be using Jira. You can go online and type in bug management tools, software development, and you'll get years worth of data to find solutions or theories or things of that nature. Jira is a pretty popular one by the group Atlassian. And so I'm going to be using that for today's demonstration. It's pretty straightforward. We did the test cases one last time, and test cases were set up to be a series of tests that need to be run for a given instance of development. Bugs are a little bit different, and this is going to seem more like an overview of the development process, but it's how bugs and how stories work in tandem and together is kind of an important aspect to contextualize bugs themselves. So this is primarily for bugs, and I hope I can keep my mind on task. But in order to properly contextualize what bug management is, you need to include the other facets of the process. Otherwise, you end up becoming a little bit too emotionally involved with bugs, and you care a little bit too much. And I know that sounds weird because you want to care about bugs. I'm going to show you some examples of real bugs I've seen at companies, similar ways of how they were set up or described, and how they tend to be prioritized or completely forgotten about as a result. So yeah, here we go. Let's get into it. Let me see if I can open up the right tab here. That is it. Okay. So I'm in Jira right here. Let me go to board active sprint. Okay. So here I am. When you can go to Jira, and you can make your own project for free to test out, to trial out, and it's good. It's pretty good. You can make a whole bunch of modifications to it. I don't suggest that you do if you're just learning and starting out. Usually with an active sprint up here, and this is the view that it gave me when I created my project. And I'm not going to go through all the details of how I created the project because it took about an hour of going through to get it all set up just the way I want it to, and then realizing that I was going way too heavy into trying to duplicate what I'm currently doing to make it easier to explain, but the way we're currently doing it is just a lot more complex than maybe it needs to be. So I ended up deleting a bunch of the stuff that I did and going back to the base one that the Jira will have you in once you sign up. Anyway, so if you go through and make your own, it's going to ask you some questions like, what is this for? And I put it in is for development, and asked me who I was, and so I said QA manager, and I had asked who this was for. No, when I asked who I was, I said QA engineer. And when I said who this was for or what this was for, it was for bugs, is what I put in. And then it asked me my experience level with both, and I put that I am not a beginner, but the people that will be using it are a beginner. And so it set up this scenario for me. So I got in here, and the first thing I did is I wanted to make a task to see it show up on here. So I created a task and it didn't show up on here, and it got me a little frustrated. So I went in to the board and started messing around with the filters, and still nothing was showing up. And then I realized that this is the the sprint view and not the backlog view. So the difference between the two is the backlog is kind of the overall general pool of work that the development group has available to them. And there are people, product managers, who are constantly feeding into that pool, and they tend to feed into it at a greater rate than what's being pulled out of it. So you could almost say that it's a perpetual pool of work to pull from. A lot of sounds right there. Maybe I should whisper and make this an ASMR video. But the backlog is different from the sprint because the active sprint is what you're currently working on. So out of the entire bulk pool of work, the project managers or the business leaders have selected different items to work on right now, and that is what will go into the active sprint. So I made up a few stories and a few bugs, and I have created them, and I'm going to show you kind of how those interact and work with each other. I know this sounds like a Jira demo or a process demo. It's not, but you need to know these things in order to kind of understand and get bugs. I don't have I guess I didn't do a slideshow for this. I probably should have. But there are two kind of distinct definitions for the difference between a story and a bug. And as we go through, I hope that you'll kind of glean what that separation is, what those differences are. And at the end, I'll give you my best definition, and we'll go back and revisit the board and kind of show you the distinction, because it is, you do kind of get into a gray line between, or a gray area between what is a story and what is a bug at some levels. And so being familiar with what your organization terms as each is very important. So yeah, let's go to my backlog, and we'll see the stuff that I made up here. So I made up 6 stories and 5 bugs for an imaginary system. I don't have anything that I can demo with this, primarily because I don't want to actually show bugs that I know about of any particular system. And so, yeah, this is going to be more of a conceptual and theory-based lesson, as opposed to a literal representation that you can go and do and follow and try out yourself. And I apologize for that. Just from a professional standpoint, I can't do it to my system, and I feel bad doing it to someone else's system and then advertising it or publishing it on the web. That just feels like a scoundrel kind of move. So taking a look at this backlog, you can see the numbers over here: MS1, MS2, MS3. You can see that I use the same domain as my test management system of Sexy Tacos as the name of the project. Now these are in order of when I created them. Now you don't have to keep things this way. You can change the order on this page, but I wanted to show you that so that you can kind of understand some of the process. So essentially what would happen is, as people are creating things and putting them into the backlog, product managers are one group, but QA can be another group when they add bugs in. And so as you go throughout it, you might actually have something that looks like this in the system, because this is the order in which they were created, let's say. And so you don't really want to divide them out into groups of stories and bugs, because that doesn't help people that are trying to work through the backlog of work. Instead, you tend to want to put the things with the highest priority at the top, so that as people get done with their work and the sprint or iteration isn't done, they can come to the backlog and grab the next thing off the top. And so what someone would do, likely a project manager, someone who has a wider view of the company's needs, would come to a backlog like this and start reading through everything and going, okay, let me prioritize these and put these in order of most needed to least needed. So some of the first things that they'll take a look at are bugs. Why? Because a bug typically will represent a hindrance or obstacle or heartache to an active customer. Now, it's important that I specify what customer means here, okay? In just retail in general, the customer is the person who is buying or purchasing a product. There's an exchange of money for goods and services, or goods or services. But in an application, software application scenario, that's not entirely true. Yes, someone who logs into a website, even if they don't purchase anything, is defined as a customer. Someone who buys something is defined as a customer. An employee who logs in is defined as a customer. And so essentially a customer is anyone but the developer that interacts with, relies on, or uses the system or application that you're talking about. So a bug tends to be one of those people, one of those subgroupings, if you will, are having an issue that is prohibiting them from performing a function they believe they should be able to perform. And so those tend to be the kinds of things that derail sprints or iterations. And I'll go over that in a minute here. But it's essentially we're going to pretend like this XSS issue in search bar, and I'll explain what these mean as I go through them. We're gonna pretend like this one doesn't exist yet. Okay. Instead, we're going to do everything else around it and prioritize everything else around it, and that'll sit at the bottom and just pretend like it's not there. So if I go through, I'm going to look at the bugs here, and I'm going to say banner on the home page is one gradient shy of the company expected color scheme. Okay, that doesn't seem like too big of a problem. I'm going to move that down the list. I'm going to put that above here. And then div containers login, covers login button on some resolutions. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to mean resolutions. Okay, one customer's name is longer than the, but not input. Login breaks on IE 12. Okay, that seems like an issue. That's a bad issue, but not huge, and that's probably a lesser issue. So we're gonna set these up. Oh, hold on. I got someone at the door. Okay. I got a mattress delivered. So I might be a little bit sweatier than I was before. Anyway, so now we have these set up. At least these top three in kind of a list of prioritization as far as worse to less worse. Oh, we got to move this one as well to there, right? So after we prioritize the bugs, we're now going to insert the stories in as we deem necessary, right? So we're going to go through these each one by one and then move them around intermingled with the bugs to determine where they go. Okay, so unicorn cursor follower. It has been found that if we have a unicorn that follows the cursor around the screen, okay, I can already tell this is not going to be all that important. We don't need a unicorn following cursors. Okay. Option to reset password. Now I wanted to kind of, I channeled the inner voice of a horrible product manager when I was writing up these stories, which was a little bit fun. But try not to get hung up on how I wrote these. Option to reset password. So just going off of the name itself. Typically, you'd want to read through, figure out what the ask is, and then prioritize it. But we're just going to go off of titles right now because we don't want to take 4 hours to actually prioritize a list. So reset password, that's important. Increase logging and customer account. That sounds okay. We'll have to get more context. Allow for special characters and password, that's important. Implement new design, scheme to front end. Update pictures on landing page. Okay, so 2 of these are directly customer impacting right now, which are these 2. Because you can't reset the password, and there are some passwords which aren't allowed and we should allow them. Implement new design, scheme to front end, update pictures on landing page. So it looks like these are more, one of them is probably a marketing push for like an advertisement. And so we'll have to reach out to marketing and find out what their projected delivery date of these is. But let's say that we need to get them both done for this sprint or iteration, okay? And increase logging in customer account. Take a look at this. Okay, nothing too big, just a bum product manager being a bum product manager. Okay, so these 2 can sit at the bottom. These 2 are, okay, so these are set up the way in stories that they would be probably prioritized. And now we're going to intermingle these with these. So this one, login breaks on IE 12. Okay, I've got some good steps to duplicate there. Okay, so we do need to get this done because if you can't log in at all, it doesn't matter if you can reset the password. You can reset it, but you can't log in. That's a problem. You can still create an account, but yeah. So this one is lower because this one you can't get access. This one you can, but it's less ideal for a subset of users. So we're going to put this up here, this one underneath it. Update pictures, div covers. Okay, that's a customer facing one. These 2 are both things that customers are currently facing issues with. So we're going to do things like this. And banner is 1 gradient shy. And we're going to do that. Okay. So here we have the prioritized list of things that we need to work on. And so what we're going to pretend to do is we're going to create a sprint and start looking at the sprint. So here we go. Create a sprint. It's called MS Sprint 1. I'm fine with that. We're gonna pull things in according to workload that we have. So let's say we have 2 developers, and our sprint cycle is, or iteration cycle is 1 week. Okay. Typically, what you would do is you would go into a planning meeting or an estimation meeting with developers, and the developers would discuss each of these tasks one by one and say, okay, based off of our understanding of what's in the ticket, we think it's going to cost this much time or this many units to do that. And the product or the project manager has a velocity, basically a limit to the number of units that can be done in a sprint for those 2 developers. Okay, so as they're talking about it, each of these are being assigned a different number, and what the project manager then does goes, excuse me, they go, okay, well, we need to put this one into okay, this one, because it's an outstanding bug that is a big problem, and we need to get that taken care of. This is obviously kind of how I think I keep getting a chime, and I'm pretty sure it's the echo. And I don't know if people are like chiming in and listening. Because my parents showed off that function. I don't know if they're trying to like communicate with me on that. Anyway, so let's say throughout a certain sprint, say this is our sprint. Okay, we looked at these things and we're like, okay, or these three things, we're like, okay, we can't fit that into the active sprint right now. We think we can get all of this done. Let's go ahead and start off the sprint. And so kick off the sprint name, 1 duration, let's say it's 1 week. Start date is 30th, so it'll end in 7 days. Sprint goal, fix highest rated bugs and improve life of customer login experience. That seems to be a bit about the theme of this sprint, is that a lot of this work has to do with logging in or their experience when they first land on the landing page. And so with those two things, that's kind of the theme of the sprint, and so that's what the goal is going to be. Whatever we needed to do to fix the worst bugs and improve the customer's experience overall is what we want to do. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. Now, as you can see, I went back to that board that we were at the beginning, and at the time it just had the to-do, the in progress, and the done, but they were blank. Now that we started the sprint and the sprint is active and we have this work in it, it's gone back to this view for ease of use. Okay, and so the ease of use is that as work is being picked up, so say the first 2 devs pick up the first 2 tasks, they go to progress, they move them from one category to the next. So now anyone who wants to know how the active sprint or iteration is going, they just have to come to this board and look at it, and they can see, oh, okay, they've picked up the first 2 tasks, they're working on it, there are still 5 things left to do. That's good to know. And say a couple days goes by and we get something like this going on, right? And we're at this phase here, okay? And so someone comes back here and takes a look and goes, oh, hold on a second. There's only one thing in progress, but we have 2 developers. What's the other developer doing? And so the question comes down, and then we find out here on the backlog that someone has created a new issue that identifies a cross-site scripting bug, a security issue in the system. And we can't wait for the next active sprint in order for it to get deployed, right? So someone goes, oh, we have this problem, we need to get it fixed. So this is where something might come in as an escalation or a hot fix. And so someone will go, okay, well, we need to have this done now. So typically what'll happen, you'll see here that if I switch between the views, I have 3 things in to do, 1 into progress, and everything I put into done has been removed because it's done. We don't have to track it anymore. So we got 3 things and 1 thing, and in the backlog we have 4 things on the list, because even though one of them is in progress, it's not done yet. So someone is working on this right now, and these three things are still in waiting in the backlog pool. But someone comes along and says, we need to fix this. We go through and we read through, we get a couple of the developers aside, or in this case, we pulled 1 aside and said, we need you to give us an estimation on how long it's going to take to do this. And that's why that 1 developer wasn't working on anything. It's because he's looking at this and trying to figure out how long it's going to take. And so what ends up happening is that they'll give an estimation, and after they've given their estimation, the project owner will compare the value of getting this done with the value of getting these other 4 things done. And they'll begin to pull work out of the iteration or out of the sprint to make room for this one thing. So let's say we go back to our marketing group and say, okay, which of these is the most important? And they say, okay, we got to get the new design scheme out there. Updating the pictures would be great, but the new design scheme is the most important. So we're going to pull that out and put that back in the backlog at the top. Yep. Can I confirm I'm moving it out of the active sprint? And then we go to this and go, okay, well, this is a problem. It's blocking a customer, but it's blocking one customer. Not a huge issue, right? Still a big issue. We can work with that customer around it. We can still get them logged in. They'll just have to use some shorter credentials for now. So let's justify not doing that one, and we're to put that back into the top of the backlog. And I'm trying to keep things in the same priority they were in. So now I'm going to take the cross-site scripting issue, and I'm going to move that up to the top because that needs to be done right now. So the developer who did the estimation and took a look at this will then go back into the active sprint view, and they'll grab this and pull this over and say, okay, I'm working on this now. And then once the other developer who was working on this gets done with their work, they'll move this over to done, grab the next one, move it over to in progress. And this is typically how the process will go. So let's say the developer is still working on this and it's like Thursday. So it's getting toward the end of the week, end of the sprint. And this developer is thinking, okay, I'm going to be done with this at the end of today, but not much further than that. And this developer is like, well, I just got done with this, so I can start picking up new stuff. What ends up going on is that the developer will go to this board, and they'll typically message the project manager and say, hey, I got done a little bit early. I might have time for one more piece of work. Are these still prioritized in the needed order? And the project manager can come in and take a quick look and go, yeah, this is still the order, but the problem is that you assigned the amount of work to this issue as being a day and a half, and you put in the work for this issue about half a day. And so since we're past the middle of Thursday, if we give you this task, it's not going to get done by the time we have to deploy based off of your estimation. So instead of grabbing the top one, let's give you this one, the update pictures on landing page, and see if we can maybe get that one done. And even though there's something with a higher priority, it's what we can fit into the current sprint, which kind of takes precedence. And so then we go back to the sprint. The developer grabs this issue, pulls it off the board, and both developers work until the end of the day, and say the next morning, Friday, they get everything done, move it over into done, and they are good. And then typically they'd spend Friday looking at how the sprint went, take a look at the caveats, the good things that happened good from it, the bad things that happened, things they learned, identified any kind of process issues or constraints they came across. And that would be it for Friday. And then Monday, you'd start the process over again with planning and putting things into an active sprint. And here we are back at the original view. We go back to doing active sprint planning and moving tasks up. And as people add in new backlog items, this prioritized list would shift and change. So yeah, that's kind of how the process works with bugs and stories. Now, I know I've said, and I got to remember this is a bug video, but this is important because what it does is it puts some extra weight on what a bug is versus what a story is. Now, is a bug more important than a story? No. Very simply, no. In a 1-to-1 ratio, they have equal importance. Both are meant to improve the customer experience in some way. If you get down to specific bugs and specific stories, there is a difference, and there are things that are more important than others. In this system, you can see that this bug is more important than this story, but this story is more important than this bug. And so, which is more important? Undefined. You have to give more context for that to make sense. And so, a bug isn't the only thing that can kind of derail a sprint like we saw here. If a new feature comes down the pipeline and it's because a new customer, a new high value customer has said that they'll sign up if we implement this new feature, and they're worth 100 customers in value to the company, then we're going to want to derail the active sprint if there's anything in that sprint or iteration that we're working on with less value than 100 users. And so that story can derail a sprint, and I've seen it happen. So the big difference, okay, between a bug and a story is the cause for the need of the work. Okay, it's the event that triggers the work needed that determines whether or not it's a bug or a story. Okay, so let me give you a few examples here. Okay, so let me go back. I got to do a query here, and I got to do a different search. I'm just going to do order by rank ascending. I'm actually going to just, don't worry about how to do the query here. I changed it to that because it's easier. And I'm going to change it so I can see all the issues that I made. Okay. I'm going to go into a list view here. Okay. So these are all the things that I had made. Okay, don't worry about this purple one down here. It's messing around with something else. Yes, we have all these things here. So let's go through and read some of them and kind of figure out what the intention is or the event that caused them to be made, to be recorded and then proposed. Okay. So MS1. Unicorn cursor follower. It has been found that if we have a unicorn that follows the cursor around the screen via JavaScript mouse overcall, customers have a far better experience. Okay, so we have found, or it has been found, this is the result of a study or some research or something done by a business person or analytics person out there. This is a proposal for new functionality different than what has been proposed and accepted in the past. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Banner on our home page is gradient 1 shy of expected color. Okay, there is a hard to see. This is hard to see with the naked eye. I wrote these and I'm having a problem reading them. Since not everyone has trained eyes as I do, but the banner for the home page is the wrong color. Just so you know, STD in the testing world means steps to duplicate. I'm pretty sure a QA somewhere in the past did that on purpose just to F with people, so that you can talk about all the STDs you want to work. Bit of a philanderer. So steps to duplicate. Go to the home page and look at the banner at the top. Compare the banner at the top and the bottom in color. Right-click on the top banner and inspect it. Use the dev tools to copy the hex color value of the banner and paste it into a notepad to hold on to. Now right-click on the banner at the bottom and do the same. Comparing the hex values, you see they're different. So this is coming out of the need of that we have a color scheme, The color scheme has been implemented and in place, and we believe that someone made a mistake and put the wrong color hex into the banner, and it needs to be changed. Okay, so that is a bug. Increased logging in customer account. One of our customers with dementia has insisted several times, again, please, I was writing this somewhat therapeutically for a horrible product manager. It's not too often I come across a horrible product manager. I think it's actually less frequently that I'll come across a bad developer, for many industry reasons. But I was taking a personality of a developer that I had met and putting that into a product manager. And this is kind of the result that I had, just kind of far out there, horrible bedside manner, and horrible ways of justifying behavior. So one of our customers with dementia has insisted several times that they've never logged into our system, and our current action log is too third-person-y for people with dementia. So we need to remove the customer's first name and simply say you. This will prove to them that they are logged in and not the gremlins living behind their radiator. Do people still have those? Okay, so this story was born out of the need that a customer had for showing to the customer that they've logged in. And so the it's not a problem with the system, right? It's just that the way that someone is using the system is different than the way it was intended to be made. And it's functioning correctly as it was set up, but they want it to function differently now. And so that's a story. Okay, and that's 11. One customer's name is longer than our field allows to be saved but not input. Description. If you go to the customer or to the account creation page and create an account, the fields don't have any kind of limitations on them to indicate how long the fields will allow. This gives an impression that longer values are allowed for our DB constraints. We need to add on-screen validations and limitations to match the DB constraints. Steps to duplicate, go to the home page, go to the create account link at the top of the page next to the login button, copy and paste the following into all the fields. So a really long, straight text value. Try to create an account with this and see that it is accepted. It allows you to create the account. Try to log in with the newly created account, see that it doesn't work. Query the database with the following query. Select star from account where name like this is entire percent close and query. See one result with the fields cut off at different lengths throughout the account. So I'm not going to go into the database query here. This is an example of what a bug would look like. Underneath it, you have additional information. This happened to a customer with like 37 letters in his name, which is part of his email address, and the system wouldn't let him log in or recover his password. Expected behavior when they get to the limited number of characters for a field, the character stops showing up on the page. So someone was trying to use the system, and we found out that there are two different validation strategies in place which conflict with each other, causing a disruption of problem. Now, this is kind of getting close to the gray line or the gray area between a bug and a story. Okay, I hope that by now you're kind of understanding the difference between a bug and a story. A bug isn't strictly a something that's broke, that doesn't work. A bug is essentially we had functionality set up with a specific intention in mind, and that intention is violated in some way. So we can see here that we have on the back end, we have the database, okay? And the database stores all the data. And the database has certain constraints around it to say, okay, I'm only going to allow certain kinds of data or certain lengths of data to enter in. And then you have the front side of the website or of the application, and the front side is sending data to the database and pulling data out of the database. And this application is using different validation than the database. So let's say we have a phone number, and the backend system says you can only use numbers. No additional characters, no spaces, just numbers. And on the front end, someone types in their phone number with a dash in the middle, right? Or dash separating area code, first three, last four for us Americans. We should say us US Americans, like the Iraq and like such as. And that's a reference for you. And so I totally lost my train of thought thinking of Miss South Carolina and that teen pageant thing. And anyway, so we have the front end system that says, that doesn't tell the user anything about what the actual system is expecting. And as a result, they have a bad experience. One would argue, well, the front end site is doing exactly what it was made to, so therefore it's not broken. And that's why some people would call it a story. But the back end side of the system says, no, it obviously isn't working because the intention of the page is to create an account. And an account requires a phone number, and when you type in something with dashes, the database kicks out the value. So now the value they input is not the same value as the database, and that was the intention, was that the data they input is saved into the database, so if the customer calls that data back, they can see it and modify it and edit it and have it be overwritten and saved back. And so in that case, it's a bug. And so we would write it up as a bug, and we'd say, okay, we have to figure out, because either there's a bug in the database or there's a bug on the front end side. We have to figure out where the bug is and fix it. So we write it up and say what we expected was that if someone tries to log in with incorrect values, there'd be some sort of prompting or indication on the screen to the customer. So regardless of what the solution ends up being, what we expect for the customer experience to be is that they have a better experience, that they can do what it seems like we're asking them to do. And so that's a bug. Okay, let's go back and see if we can find a update. Let's do this one, update pictures on the landing page. So with the update pictures on the landing page, they basically say, look, we have some old photos on the site that are just way too depressing for people. We need to update them. We asked you to put them out there, and we appreciate that they've been out there, but we need to change them. And so even though it's a bad customer experience for them to come to the landing page and see pictures from the Great Depression, it's what was asked for. So therefore it's there. So it's a bad experience, but still a story, and it's a story to update it. So both the bug and a story are meant to improve the experience of the user. It's the event which causes you to acquire that need, and that determines if it's a bug or a story, right? If someone goes, hey, I get depressed every time I go to your website, that's like, oh, we should probably change that to improve your experience. If someone goes to the website and says, I cannot log in for the life of me, that sounds like a bug, or the user is doing it wrong. But that's kind of where you start going with it, is I tried to do this, and I thought I could do this, and I can't do that. Versus when I'm going through the site, it feels weird that I have to do it this way. I would think I should be able to do it this way, but I can't. And so one of them is kind of a question, and the other one is more of a knowledge. So yeah, when you are writing a bug, these are the kinds of things you want to put in there. You want to give as much specific detail to the developer so that they have an easy way of going back and replicating it and duplicating it. That's why there's steps to duplicate. You want them to be able to duplicate it repeatedly without issue. Okay, so if, let's say I just this bug, let's say I write up this bug and I just say XSS issue in the search bar. XSS is cross-site scripting. It's a security issue. It's a JavaScript security issue. And so we say here, look, we understand that when you type in something to the search bar, it prints out what you type onto the page. And we get that, and it's a good thing to have in there for customers. However, what we have neglected to do is we've neglected to sanitize what we're putting into the page, and because the search function is going through JavaScript, that once JavaScript grabs and sees that value, it runs it as JavaScript. And so if we're going to be printing it back to the page, we need to take the entire body of text, qualify it as text and not code, escape out of the special characters, which would make the code see it as code, and then print it out kind of piece by piece to the page. It'll happen very quickly so that the user doesn't really see what's happening, but it'll prevent it from actually going and executing. But then we have these steps to duplicate. Now you can see here that I have some good steps, but I don't give some of the most important steps that I need and some of the most important details. So this is an actual issue bug that I found in the past, and so were the other ones that I had on there. That if you go to the home page and you click on the search box and you copy this into the search bar and hit enter, that the next page will pop up and alert 123 on the box, and this is the bad thing. It's a huge security issue and it needs to be resolved immediately. Now, here's what happens a lot of the time with poorly written bugs. A developer may have a different browser preference than you do as a QA. Or let's say that the application, in this case a website piece of software, is let's say that the developer prefers Safari instead of Chrome or Firefox or Edge. And you found this using Firefox. And I don't specify Firefox or the version of Firefox. The developer could go in with Safari and open up the site, type this in, hit enter, and nothing will happen. And they'll reply back and they'll say something like, I did this in Safari and I didn't see any XS. Mind clarifying a bit? And they could save that. And the QA would sometimes be tagged, or hopefully be tagged, and they can come back and say, oh yeah, I did this in Fox, not Safari. So try that A. And then the developer would come back in and go, okay, I see it now. Thanks. Great. So you have this thread in the bug to help clarify what the issue is, and now the developer has enough information. And then sometimes what will happen is that the QA will come back into the issue here, go to the home page using Firefox, and they'll save the changes, and now it'll reflect the actual information. So it doesn't require someone to peruse all the comments to figure out what actually qualifies the bug. And this is actually a bug we can show you. Okay, let's I think this will allow. There it is. 1, 2, 3. So W3 Schools is a great site for trying out code and tinkering around real quick, because it plays it and runs it and displays it for you very quickly. It's okay for learning how to do things, but it's a very base framework, and not even a framework. It's like the Lincoln Logs of learning how to program, but I wouldn't put any kind of weight into it because nothing really secures it down. Like it's just it's good for trial and error, not for like great in-depth learning and trying to do stuff. Like theory crafting how two technologies can work together. Don't use W3 schools for that. However, so I took the value that is in the bug there, and essentially what happens for these kinds of bugs is a user will use some JavaScript, and that's what this is, JavaScript, and it will say it'll send this to the server, right? So the server sends to you this information, okay, and then you take that information, and if you want to interact with it, you can send a response back to the server. And if you inject something that's code-based back to the server, then the server will sometimes take a look at it and go, oh, I need to run this, and then run it. But it's running on the server, not just your system. It's running on the server, and actually you can ask it for details and data about the server, like the operating system that's running it, or start asking it information about the database that it's connecting to. And then you can start asking about variables used to connect to the database. And eventually you can start creating JavaScript messages that will pull data out of the database using the search bar from a website. And so let's see what this is. Submit was file name R. This is an answer. Okay, that's still going. So let's go ahead. I'm going to remove this. What happens if I do that? Illegal input. Okay, so you can see that W3 Schools is actually sanitizing some of their even in this kind of context, they're sanitizing. I guess it's because I'm setting it to the server. That was bad. I shouldn't have done that. But essentially, a value like that, an input where it might print out on the next page what the value is, would, if it returns back this form of pop-up, then it's an indication that there's a vulnerability or a problem or a bug. Okay. So, kind of tying things up here, a bug is a violation of an intended functionality based off of the intention of when it was made, okay? Not the intention of how it is desired to be used right now. So an example of this is, let's say we set up I think I actually have an example in here, where allow for special chars and password. Chars is characters. It's the short abbreviated term for characters. So allow for special characters in password. So let's say when you set up the account, or set up your system, you have your password limitations, and you say password has to be between 6 and 10 characters long. You have to use uppercase and lowercase and numbers. But that's it. That's all our system is robust enough to allow and account for. So just use those, okay? And so that's how the system is created, and it's created, and there aren't any bugs of that. You can type in uppercase, lowercase, 6 to 12 characters. It doesn't allow for 5, it doesn't allow for 13. And we've done all the tests on it, and everything is working just fine with that password creation, okay? And then 17 years down the road, security gets updated, and the way that hacking is done is a lot more brute force now, and it's easier to guess those kinds of passwords without including special characters. And so the order comes down that someone wants to use special characters for their password, and so we have to change it to fit the industry expectation for customer use. Now, is it a problem that our site is less secure because of this this decision that was made 17 years ago? Yeah. Is it a problem that someone's account has been or likely will be hacked if we keep this in place? Yeah. Is it a bug? No. It's not a bug because the intention of when it was made is for it to behave exactly the way that it's behaving. Now, if we found out that you could do 13 characters instead of the max of 12, that would be a bug. If they want to change the way that the password field works, it's a story. And they're changing it not because it's a violation of the original intention of what was being made. They're changing it because it's no longer, the way that it was intended is no longer a viable use case for our customers. Okay. And I know that seems like a really fickle area to kind of dodge and dance around, but it happens a lot. You will often get something that's reported as a bug when it should be a story, and things that are reported as stories when they should be bugs. The reason for this is sometimes people are confused by the definitions or the intentions behind them. Sometimes it could be someone trying to manipulate the system if they notice that bugs or stories get done at a faster or a greater rate than their counterpart. Let's say more bugs get taken care of than stories. As a product manager, I would be super tempted to write up some of my stories as bugs to try to get them through the system faster and get my customers taken care of first. And there was a point I was going to make. So yeah, there could be all sorts of reasons for why there's confusion between the two. It's really a matter of keeping your kind of your understanding in place and being kind of firm with your conviction of what each of them is. Yeah. So yeah, try to keep in mind what a bug is. Try to keep in mind what a story is, and how they interact with each other. Okay, that's what I was trying to remember. There are different connotations behind a bug versus a story. Okay, if we were to just take a look at our product right now and say this is the entire future, past, and present of our project. Someone could take a look at this board and go, oh, this is a bad product. And they could make that kind of assessment because they would see almost as the same number of bugs as they do with feature requests or stories. And say, okay, it seems like each time you make something, there's at least one bug that's going to come as a result of it. So either your product management group isn't doing well, or your developers aren't doing well with understanding the product manager. Maybe there's a communication issue between the two, or your QA group isn't doing a good enough job of thinking of all the scenarios or the edge cases that could be taken into account. There are so many reasons that could indicate that something is wrong with the product and the people that are interacting with it. And so there's often a lot of emotion that goes into the debate of bug or story. Because if something is marked as a bug when it shouldn't be, it really skews that whole perception of how healthy is the product. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with using that as a good assessment or measurement. I don't. Because I think I covered in a previous video that a bug is nothing more than a byproduct of the process working well. And so people that use this kind of mentality tend to undermine that considerably. But it does happen and you will come across it. Someone will take a look at the product and the project and compare the number of active bugs with the number of active stories. They'll also take a look at the influx of bugs and the outflux of bugs and go, okay, that should be going down, but it's staying even. That means that the number of bugs that we're fixing are the same as the number of bugs coming in, and the work that we're doing isn't getting done. And so we need to change the work that we're doing, or modify our communication, or do something in the process to make it change. And I think that's a decent assessment, but trying to blame it specifically on the result of bugs existing is just weird, because it's you can't not have bugs. I don't care what system you're in. There's always going to be bugs. I'd even posit that an AI learning off of itself is realizing that it has bugs of its own, and that's how it improves and gets better. It's because of bugged out programming, bugged out realizations or expectations or assumptions, but it's you'll see that bugs and stories, while pretty much touching in the boundary of which is which, the implication of one over the other is kind of a company-wide ripple. And so bugs have to be dealt with in a proper manner. So let's say we go into a bug here. Let's say we go into this bug later, and we notice that after like 6 months of work, this bug is always at the bottom of the priority because no one cares. No one sees what this person reporting on. This doesn't have to be a QA. It could be a customer, could be a designer, could be a support agent, sales agent, whomever. One of the customers of the system has reported this. And we keep noticing that no one else has complained about it, no one else has brought up issue with it, and other work is more and more prioritized. What ends up happening to bugs like these, instead of just leaving them in the list and adding to that implication of bad, what ends up happening is that it'll be changed to, oh, I don't have it here. It'll be changed to like won't do, or won't fix, or not a problem, or something to indicate that this is never going to get done. And in a sense, it gets marked as done. So it's removed out of the active pool and put into the realm beyond, so that it's no longer included with the pool of bugs that people use as a reference for quality. It has that much of an impact in a system, and so it's often a point of contention among people for the kinds, so the quantity and the quality of bugs being written. If someone is going through and writing up a whole bunch of these, they're probably not going to be lauded as like a hero or as a great QA, because they're spending a lot of their time finding super edge case, non-impacting bugs, which aren't going to be in the popular vote of things that need to get done, when they could be looking at something a little bit more central and trying to tackle bugs that might have bigger issues and depths to them than a hex value difference by a factor of 1, you know. And so people who tend to write up a lot of useless or won't fix bugs tend to, over time, be ignored. They'll say, hey, I got another bug for you. And the person will go, great, tell me about it. And as they're telling them about it, the person listening is playing like solitaire, not paying attention, going, yeah, that's amazing. Let me know once you write it up. And after they write it up, the person will go in and mark it as won't fix, because they just know that person tends to report on as close to nothing as can be. Now, I'm not saying that's the best thing to do. I'm not saying that's something you should do. I'm just letting you know that's something that happens, and it happens often enough that you should be aware of it. In essence, a bug is a political statement. is a company-wide political statement. And once you get into that kind of aspect of the workplace, your understanding and desire of software testing will likely start to diminish a bit, because it gets a little bit frustrating to have to worry about the politics of writing a bug, and weighing out ahead of time if that indicates something not of high enough value to the company to worry about. An example, and then I'll wrap this video up and do some editing. But an example is, I used to work in a bug system that literally tracked everything forever. Doesn't matter how good or bad the bug was, it just kept it in there. And so I tried going through and cleaning up the list, and there were like 1,600 entries into this system. And I was like, I'm going to clean it up. And I went through every single one of them. It took weeks to do. And I spent like 14-hour days there because I was obsessing over them. In my opinion, it's one of the better ways of getting to know a system is to take a look at the bugs. Because if you take a look at the bugs, in the bugs, it'll tell you what the expected experience is meant to be for the customer. And if you can read that and understand that, you can get a better training in place for yourself than going through something that someone has formally put together for training for you at the company. Because they're gonna give you the pitch of what the product is supposed to be like, as though they're trying to get you to buy it. And the thing is that you've been hired on there, you've already bought it. You don't need the sales pitch. You need to understand how it works and why it works that way. And the bugs are a great place to see that, because you'll see the development discussion with the product manager and the QA discussion with the developers and the QA discussion with the product managers. And you'll see that entire triangle of communication going on and saying, okay, this is what it needs to do. It cannot work like this. It cannot work like that. It has to work like this for this reason. And after you see that and you can understand that, then when you go and interact with that specific tiny piece, you feel so much more confident, because now you have years or weeks or days of context around it. And that's why good documentation and keeping your comments in the technology versus in a side chat is just so much more valuable. But yeah, I went through like 1,600 of these bugs, and I don't think I closed more than 100 of them. People were incredibly adamant that their bug that they reported to be fixed, to the point where even some of the 100 that I closed, the people got notifications that I closed them even though they weren't fixed, and they went back in and reopened new ones for that. So duplicating bugs to keep their voice heard. And that's understandable from like a self-respect kind of perspective, but not from a company trying to do business and keep track of their own productivity and value matrices in place. That's far too political and emotional for this kind of thing. In the end, with that scenario, what I ended up doing is I removed like 70% of the access that people had to the bug management and creation system, and put a person in charge of vetting those. So as people would have issues, instead of creating things into the bug tracker, they'd have to talk to a person, and they'd have to convince the person who had access to the bug tracker that it was a big enough problem to be included in the bug tracker. And that reduced the inflow of bugs considerably, and the quality of work didn't go down, because most of the stuff that was being reported was just being ignored as low priority. So instead of reporting them and ignoring them, but keeping them around in a 1,600 massive pool, we were able to go through and start removing the things we knew we were never going to fix and take care of, and brought down the number to like 200 issues. And then some of the other things we identified as being stories, and we brought it down to about 130 or 140 bugs. And people weren't super happy about that, but it gave a truer understanding and insight to the current status of our products. And that's what the intention of a lot of these things are. There is a political impact to it, but try to be mindful of that as you are finding bugs and reporting on bugs. You don't want to be the one gradient guy, the one hex value difference guy. You want to be the cross-site scripting finding QA. And in there's probably another gray line for which is better, and at what point you stop reporting versus you should start reporting. But I don't know where that line is at, and I think I'd be hard pressed for anyone to uniquely define a solid line that says this is where it's at. Anyway, typically I do these videos in one take, and I don't have to do any kind of editing. I do have to do editing though because of the doorbell, so I'm going to jump off right now. And yeah, I encourage you to jump onto Jira, take a look at it, try to play with it, try to interact with it. And there are lots of videos out there and tutorials on how to use Jira, but use it to write up some bugs. Make sure that you include in the description what the initial issue is, what the steps to duplicate it are, any additional context that you need to provide for why this is all a problem, and then the expected behavior for what you want to have happen from it. With this information, it'll provide enough details to a product manager to be able to prioritize it, and a developer to be able to work on it. And if not, you can always use the comments section to talk back and forth to each other. So yeah, check out Jira. As you're interacting with systems, try to imagine what a bug would be and what a feature would be, what a story would be. And yeah, send me ideas. If you think you find a bug, send it to me in an email, and I'll go through and vet it for you and take a look and confirm or deny whether or not it's a bug versus a story. Okay. And I might even go to some like super strange exotic lengths to do that, like actually reaching out to the company in real life, not an imaginary one that I just talk about, and getting in touch with one of their product owners and say, hey, one of my students, people that are learning about software testing, thinks this is a bug. Would you care to elaborate or comment on it? Almost like a news reporter would. And I'm happy to go through and do that kind of stuff to kind of understand what a bug is versus a story. Anyway, so that's it for now. I hope this gave you some good insight into bug management. On writing, I guess we didn't show you how to write a bug. I'm just showing you the format of how a bug can be written out. Maintaining a bug, of updating the information in there as you have conversations with developers and product managers. How it goes through the process, how it sometimes derails the process, how sometimes it's more political than helpful, and how some things will just never ever be fixed. It's just not worth the time, and the cost is higher than the value. Anyway, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Send me any kind of bugs that you happen to find. Yeah, thank you so much for going through this. I'm sorry if these get a little boring or tedious. I'm trying to push through them in a efficient yet insightful manner. Yeah, I hope you have a great day. I hope you're staying safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.